Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be wrapping up another 6 books I've read recently. They are in no particular order, but I do have a new favorite at the end, so stay tuned for that. So first I wanted to talk about 2 audiobooks I have read this month, or rather over the last couple of months. The first one is No Friend But the Mountain by Behrouz Boochani. And this is translated from the Farsi by Oma Tofikian. I hope I'm saying that correctly. This was actually a book I started back in September, for Australia September, but I didn't finish it until we were well into October. I should preface this by saying that maybe the audiobook wasn't the best way to go for this book. At least in my case, I think it's a book that requires a bit more concentration, which is not something I always have when I listen to audiobooks. I'm often doing chores or something when listening to audiobooks, and I can get distracted sometimes. And for me, some books work really well on audio and then others don't. Usually memoirs are books that do work well for me on audio, but this one didn't, and that is totally my own preference and no fault of the book whatsoever. I mean, the subtitle of the book is not a memoir from Menace Prison, but writings from Menace Prison. So yeah, that's all to say that I think I would have gotten more out of this book if I'd read it with my eyeballs, or maybe if I had a physical copy so that I could refer back to certain sections. Okay, so having said that, I should probably tell you what this book is about. The author, he's a Kurdish Iranian journalist. He was detained on Manus Island, which was a refugee detention center off the coast of Australia, and this book is an account of his experiences there. He wrote this book in notes and text on mobile phones, which were then smuggled out and translated, and I think this is also part why the book sometimes felt a bit disjointed at times, because as you can imagine, Boochani wasn't able to hold a copy of his book or like see the whole document as a whole at the time he was writing it, because he was detained in this prison, so he could not go back, review things or edit things, and I believe he did have some contact with the translator, but wasn't able to sit down, have a conversation, talk backwards and forwards to exchange ideas, because he was still illegally detained. There is a really extensive translated note in this book, which is one of the parts I would love to read again, where he talks about his experience translating this book, and also how he drew inspiration from Persian storytelling traditions, which relies a lot on poetry, and I think that would work better with words I could see on a page. Now this book, as you can imagine, is very difficult to read at times. The way the refugees were treated at Manus Prison was at best needlessly bureaucratic. But more often than not, it was horrible, it was violent, dismal, and inhumane. And the way that the book is written and the situation it is set in make it feel very Kafkaesque. It's very claustrophobic and suffocating. I do think it's an important book, and like with many books written from a refugee perspective, it's a must-read. Especially if you live in a country where a lot of people seek asylum, and especially if you live in a country where political parties or political candidates will use their ideas on welcoming refugees, or rather not welcoming refugees, as a way to win votes, which I guess is probably true for most countries in the Western world. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say on that book for today. The next book I read on audio was something completely different, and that was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I think a lot of people are familiar with this book. I feel like it's one of those books that is like in the fantasy or horror genre, but it finds this bigger readership with readers that maybe don't necessarily read these genres. So the book starts with a prologue where we meet four friends who are about to undergo a special ritual to be introduced to their coven, because these four young girls are all witches. And then we jump forward in time to what is present day, and we follow these four girls who are now women. They have each gone their separate ways. They're all living in different parts of the UK. They are all still witches, and they have a job or they work in that capacity, but they're all doing very different things. And each chapter will be from one of their points of view. And the catalyst of this story is a young boy called Theo. He possesses a lot of raw magic in a way that is kind of unprecedented in this world, and he is not able to control it. And then the oracles of this world predict that he will be a key player in the rise of Leviathan, and that would be a bad thing. So that's the premise of the story, and as you can imagine, this sets up this incredibly exciting, thrilling, magical witching adventure. It definitely has some like Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of vibes, with like the demons and witches and all the lore and the good versus evil. It's a very cinematic fantasy epic set in a modern world. But then it also has this very interesting political undertone. I'm not going to get into how exactly, because I don't want to spoil the plot, but the book goes into trans people, transphobia, feminism, gender roles, in a way that I thought was very original and fun. Juno Dawson herself is a trans woman, and she definitely brings a lot of insight into this topic. I think occasionally it might have been a little bit too much on the nose, a bit too, hey, I want to discuss these topics and I'm gonna fit them into the story whichever way. But mostly I think it really blended into the story very well. And even when it didn't, I appreciated that she did it anyway. I think the way she represented issues transgender people are facing into the story, it worked really well. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this book. It had me on the edge of my seat. The audiobook was really well done as well. It is narrated by Nicola Coughlan, who you might know of Dairy Girls, and she does a really excellent job. So if you're looking for a good audiobook, I could definitely recommend this one. Yeah, that was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I should say that this is the first book in the series, and I'll definitely be checking out the next book as well. Now I will talk about 4 more books that I read with my eyeballs. The first one I will only mention very briefly. It's a book by a Belgian author that hasn't been translated. It is Tosca by Vanhauweart. So this book is set up as a letter that the writer has sent her editor, explaining why it has been taking her so long to write her book. And the reason is that she kind of got involved with this young woman who seemed to be in trouble, and she tried to help her and just got too involved and things escalated a bit. There was more to this book, but it's difficult to summarize this book in a few sentences and not get into like the entire plot of the book. And I feel like that's why I didn't like this book. It felt it was way too not complicated, but too literary and too meta. It's very much about how far you go as a writer to put something in your books, and the blurring of professional and personal life, and where does the story end and your own life begin, and vice versa, and where you draw the line in getting involved in other people's stories. And it was all just a little bit too smart for me. Yeah, I just don't think that books about writers and writing are really my thing. But if they are, and you can read Dutch, then maybe check it out. I mean, I still finished it, and something in the story definitely compelled me to read it. So there's that. I also read How to Break Up With Your Phone by Catherine Price. I saw Rosika of The Midnight Reader talk about this book a while ago, and it kind of came at the right time for me, because at the time I was really fed up with my phone, and especially fed up with myself for being so dependent on my phone. And when she talked about this book and how it helped her with taking a bit more distance from her phone, I thought, hey, that would be something for me. So I checked it out from the library and I read it. So this book is divided into two parts. The first part is more about the psychology behind phones, how they are designed to be addictive, and how they influence our ability to focus, our ability to think and to connect with other people. And then the second half is actually a 30-day step guide to break up with your phone, or rather just have a more healthy relationship with your phone. Some of these steps are very practical, like deleting apps from your phone, arranging them differently so they don't look so appealing, or getting an alarm clock so you don't have to have your phone in your bedroom for an alarm, things like that. And then some of the steps are just a bit more mindful, like writing down how you feel when you use your phone, how you feel when you don't have your phone with you, how do you feel when other people are using their phone around you, etc, etc. So yeah, I did the 30-day steps, and now I feel like I have a better relationship with my phone. It just very much served its purpose. Now, this book didn't give me any revolutionary insights. There's no mind-blowing revelations. So in that regard, the book didn't really teach me anything new, or anything that I couldn't have thought of myself. But just having someone laying out a step-by-step guide can be very useful. And like I said, it worked for me. So yeah, I'm glad I read it. Then I read Devotion by Hannah Kent, and this was just such a special story, so beautiful. It's about a teenage girl called Hannah. She lives in Germany in the 19th century, and her family is part of the old Lutheran faith. And I'm not exactly sure of the history, but there was some change in religion going on at that time, and a form of persecution. They were tolerated, but not allowed to practice their faith publicly. So they lived in these small, very tight-knit communities with a lot of traditional family values and a lot of social control. So yeah, just to give you a bit of an impression of the environment Hannah was living in. So Hannah feels very different from her peers, and especially girls her age. They are all concerned with marriage and starting families and all that, and she just feels very out of step with her peers. Like she tries to fit in as well, but just never seems to get it quite right, never saying the right thing. She's a very dreamy, wild sort of girl. She loves being outside, she loves being in nature. She has a very spiritual connection to the natural world as well. You know, she loves being around trees to hear them sing. So you can imagine she doesn't fit very well with this very traditional religious community that she's a part of. And then Thea comes into her life. She and her mother are new to the community. They just moved into the little village they live in. And Hannah and Thea very quickly become very close friends. They really find each other as kindred spirits, and they develop this very loving relationship. Nowadays we would call it a lesbian romance, but obviously in the time and the setting they were in, they didn't call it that, but they knew they loved each other, and they felt physically and spiritually very close to each other. And maybe because they didn't have the words for that, their relationship felt very pure and genuine and tender. So at some point in the story, the community has an opportunity to leave Germany for Australia, where they will be able to freely express their religion and settle there. So they embark on this very long and hard journey on a ship to the other side of the world. And something happens on that ship that is incredibly impactful to the story. I don't think I should tell you what happens, because I think it's better not knowing going in, but it's definitely something I did not see coming, and it changes the whole tone of the book. I personally really loved how the author did it, but I've also seen some reviews of people for who that really didn't work. Anyway, that's enough on what the book is about. Like I said, I loved this book. I thought the writing was very beautiful. It has a very lyrical prose style. It really hums and glows. I think Hannah Kent is great at making you feel the surroundings and the setting of a book. I think she did that with Burial Rites as well, which is another one of her novels, which is set in Iceland. With this book as well, first that small house in Germany, just like the smells and the sounds, and later as well when they traveled on the ship, what it was like being cramped in such close quarters, the rocking of the ship, the diseases that come from living so close together with poor food and water. It's just very vividly written in both pleasant and unpleasant things. It's a quiet, slow-paced kind of a story, but with a lot of big feelings and heart in it. It's a story about first love and the tenderness of a first love, but also that all-encompassing visceral feeling of it. I liked how it explored religion and mysticism. Obviously the book is called Devotion, and that comes back in so many ways in this book. This book really struck a chord with me. I definitely think it's not going to be for everyone. I know some people might find it just a little bit too much, but if it does sound in any way interesting, then I'd highly recommend picking it up. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about a book, and I'm actually just going to be quite short about it. It's a memoir that I'm sure everyone has read by now, and everyone has said it is the best memoir that they've ever read and that everyone should read it. That book is Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and everyone is right. You should read this book. So in case you don't know what this book is about, for a very long time Chanel Miller was known as Emily Doe. She was raped on the Stanford College campus, and her attacker got an incredibly light sentence for that crime. And this is her experience of that attack and the court case and the aftermath of that. It's a story that will make you sad, it will make you angry, but it will also make you feel powerful and hopeful. I had a real sense of gratitude when reading this book. Chanel Miller writes a very honest and I don't like the word, but raw story. That's what it is. In her vulnerability, she creates this open space, a space for anyone who something similar has happened to, for anyone who's been scared, for anyone who's not been believed. She makes space and says, you know, your feelings are valid and your pain is valid. Her writing is so beautiful and thoughtful and just so precise in telling how she felt and how it impacted her life. I mean, I think for the story alone you should read this book and hear what she has to say. But I feel like she's also a writer first and foremost, and her grasp of the English language is really astounding. Yeah, it absolutely is a must read. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. That's another 6 books wrapped up. If you have any thoughts or comments on any of the books I've talked about today, I'd love to have a chat in the comments. Yeah, tell me what your favorite memoir is. Yeah, that's it for today. I hope you all have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.